What if the path of your financial life did not change slowly, step by step, but instead shifted in a single, quiet moment that almost no one noticed? Imagine a morning in 2026 that feels like every other morning you have lived through. The air is the same, the routine is familiar, and nothing around you seems different. Yet deep inside, something subtle begins to move. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It does not arrive like a storm. Instead, it feels like a gentle turning of an invisible wheel, something that quietly changes the direction of your money, your opportunities, and your sense of stability. For those born under the goat zodiac, this is not just imagination. This is the hidden story of 2026. A year that does not announce its power openly, but carries within it a sudden shift, one that can alter your financial flow in ways you may not expect and may not even recognize at first. Many people will walk through this year thinking nothing unusual has happened. They will continue their habits, follow their routines, and wonder why things feel slightly off, slightly different, yet impossible to explain. But a few will feel it. A few will sense that something is changing beneath the surface. They will notice that the way money comes and goes is no longer the same, that opportunities appear in unusual ways, that certain doors close quietly, while others open just as silently, and in that awareness lies the beginning of transformation. Here is the truth that is rarely spoken. This shift will not come with clear signs. It will not knock on your door or call your name. It will whisper through small events, subtle changes, and moments that seem unimportant, and because of that, many will miss it completely. They will look for something big, something obvious, something undeniable, and by the time they realize what has happened, the moment will already be gone. So today, I will walk with you through this hidden journey, not just to tell you what may happen, but to help you feel when it begins. Because for the GOAT in 2026, the difference between staying the same and stepping into a new financial path comes down to one simple thing: whether you recognize the moment when everything quietly begins to change. To understand why this quiet shift carries so much power, we must step back and look deeper into the nature of the GOAT itself. Because in the world of zodiac energy, nothing happens randomly. Every sign moves through life with its own rhythm, its own way of responding to change, and its own hidden strengths and vulnerabilities. The GOAT is not a sign that rushes forward or forces outcomes. It does not chase aggressively or demand control. Instead, it moves with feeling. It senses the environment, reads the emotional tone of situations, and waits for the moment that feels right. This sensitivity allows the GOAT to avoid unnecessary sangharsh, to maintain harmony, and to build a life that feels stable and meaningful over time. But this same sensitivity can become hesitation when faced with sudden change. Because when something shifts too quickly, when the energy becomes unstable or unpredictable, the GOAT often pauses. It reflects. It questions. It waits for clarity before acting. And in many situations, this is wise. But in certain rare moments, waiting becomes the very thing that causes loss. Now, 2026 brings a very different kind of energy. It is the year of the fire horse, an energy that is fast, restless, and constantly moving. Fire horse energy does not stay in one place. It creates opportunities suddenly, but it also takes them away just as quickly. It rewards action, timing, and decisiveness. This creates a powerful contrast. On one side, you have the GOAT calm, intuitive, and cautious. On the other side, you have the fire horse, intense, fast, and unpredictable. When these two forces meet, they do not cancel each other out. Instead, they create a dynamic environment where change happens rapidly, but must be recognized through subtle awareness. In feng shui and spiritual teachings, this type of interaction is often described as a moving current of wealth energy. It does not stay still. It flows, shifts, and changes direction. And within that movement, there are brief moments when the flow becomes strong, moments when financial opportunities align perfectly, but only for a short time. For the goat, this means that 2026 is not a year where success comes from steady effort alone. It is not about working harder in the same way as before. Instead, it is about sensing when the current changes and moving with it at the right moment. Some goats will feel this shift but hesitate, thinking they need more time, more certainty, more clarity, and by the time they decide, the moment will have already passed. Others will trust their intuition, even when they do not fully understand what is happening, and take small but decisive steps forward. And that is where the difference begins. Because in this year, your financial path is not shaped only by what you do, but by when you do it. Timing becomes more powerful than effort. Awareness becomes more valuable than certainty. So before the shift fully arrives, there is a period of quiet preparation, a phase where nothing seems obvious, yet everything is slowly being arranged beneath the surface. And if you do not recognize this phase for what it truly is, you may mistake it for instability, when in fact, it is the beginning of alignment. Before any great change reveals itself, there is always a period where nothing seems to be happening. For the goat in 2026, this phase arrives quietly, almost invisibly, in the early part of the year. Life continues in its familiar rhythm. The days feel ordinary. Income flows in the usual way. Expenses appear predictable. There is no clear sign that anything significant is about to unfold. And yet, beneath this calm surface, something is slowly being rearranged. You may begin to notice small interruptions, not dramatic enough to cause alarm, but just enough to feel unusual. A payment that arrives later than expected. An opportunity that seems promising at first, then suddenly disappears. A plan that once felt certain now feels slightly uncertain without any clear reason why. At first, it is easy to dismiss these moments, to tell yourself that they are just coincidences, small fluctuations that happen in everyday life. But if you pay close attention, you will realize that these events are not random. They form a pattern, a quiet preparation that is gently shifting your financial path in a new direction. In spiritual understanding, this phase is not about loss. It is not about instability. It is about clearing. Old patterns, old habits, and even old sources of income that no longer align with your future path begin to loosen their hold, not all at once, but gradually, almost respectfully. As if the universe is giving you time to adjust, to release, to make space for something new. But this is where many people misunderstand what is happening. Because when stability begins to feel uncertain, the natural reaction is to hold on tighter, to become more cautious, to avoid risks, to stay within what feels safe and familiar. And for the goat, whose nature already leans toward caution, this reaction becomes even stronger. You may find yourself hesitating more than usual, questioning decisions that once felt simple, waiting for clearer signs before taking action, telling yourself that it is better to stay where things are predictable rather than step into something unknown. And in doing so, you unknowingly slow down the very shift that is trying to lift you. Because this phase is not asking you to hold on. It is asking you to let go, to release the need for complete certainty, to allow certain things to change, even if you do not fully understand why, to trust that these small disruptions are not signs of failure, but signs of realignment. If you resist this process, the shift will still come, but when it arrives, you may feel unprepared, as if everything is happening too quickly, as if the ground beneath you is moving faster than you can adjust. But if you accept this phase for what it truly is, a quiet buildup, a hidden preparation, then when the moment of change arrives, you will not feel lost. You will feel ready, because deep down, you will recognize that what seemed like small, confusing changes were actually the first signals that your financial story was already beginning to move in a new direction. And then, without warning, the moment arrives. It does not announce itself. There is no clear signal that says, now is the time. There is no perfect preparation, no final confirmation. Instead, the shift enters your life quietly, yet with a force that changes direction in an instant. For some, it begins as an opportunity that feels almost accidental, a conversation that leads to something unexpected, a chance encounter that opens a door you were not looking for, a decision that seems small at first but quickly grows into something much larger. At that moment, it may not feel like a major turning point. It may even feel uncertain, unfamiliar, or slightly uncomfortable. For others, the shift does not appear as opportunity, but as disruption. Something changes suddenly. A situation you relied on begins to move in a different direction. A source of income becomes unstable. A plan that once felt secure no longer holds the same certainty. And in that moment, it is easy to feel as if something is going wrong. But in truth, both paths are the same. Whether the shift appears as opportunity or disruption, its purpose is identical: to redirect your financial flow toward a new path that aligns with the energy of this year. This is why the moment feels confusing, because the shift does not always look positive at first. It does not always arrive in a form that feels comfortable or safe. Sometimes it looks like chaos. Sometimes it feels like loss. Sometimes it forces you to make decisions before you feel ready. And this is where the true test begins. Not a test of intelligence, not a test of skill, but a test of trust. Because in this moment, you are not being asked to predict what will happen next. You are not being asked to fully understand the outcome. Instead, you are being asked one simple question: can you move, even when you do not have full certainty? Many goats will hesitate here. They will wait for more clarity, more information, more reassurance. They will tell themselves that it is better to pause, to observe, to make sure the path is safe before stepping forward. But this shift does not wait. The energy of the fire horse moves quickly. Opportunities open and close within short windows. Decisions that are delayed become decisions that are no longer available. And the longer you hesitate, the further the flow moves without you. Yet, this does not mean you must act recklessly. The key is not speed alone. It is awareness combined with action. To feel the moment when something begins to change. To recognize that this is not just another random event, but a turning point. And then to take a step, even a small one, in the direction that feels aligned, even if you cannot see the full path ahead. Because in this moment, small actions carry great power. A single decision can shift your financial direction. A single step can open a chain of opportunities that continues to grow over time. And what seemed like a simple choice becomes the beginning of a completely new flow. This is the point where your story changes. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, in a way that only becomes clear when you look back and realize that everything began to move differently from that moment onward. And for those who recognize it, this is where the path begins to open. After the moment of sudden change passes, something unfamiliar begins to settle into your life. It is not as chaotic as before, but it is not as stable as the past either. For the goat, this is the beginning of a new flow, a different rhythm of money, opportunity, and movement that does not follow the patterns you once understood. At first, this new flow may feel uncertain. You may notice that money no longer comes from the same places as before. Opportunities may appear from directions you never expected. People, situations, and ideas that once seemed unimportant suddenly begin to play a role in your financial path. This can feel both exciting and unsettling at the same time, because while there is potential for growth, there is also a sense that you are no longer standing on familiar ground. The old ways of thinking, the habits you once relied on to create stability, no longer produce the same results. And this can create a quiet inner conflict. Part of you wants to move forward, to explore this new direction, to follow the changes that are unfolding. But another part of you wants to return to what feels safe, predictable, and known. To rebuild the structure you once trusted, to regain the sense of control you had before everything shifted. And this is where many goats make a second mistake. They try to return to the past. They attempt to recreate old patterns, to force the new flow into a familiar shape, to make things feel the way they used to feel. But the energy of 2026 does not support this. The path has already changed. The current has already moved. And when you resist that movement, you create friction. The more you try to hold on to old methods, the more difficult things begin to feel. Opportunities may slip away. Progress may slow down. The sense of confusion may increase, not because something is wrong, but because you are trying to move against the direction of the flow. But if you allow yourself to adjust, something remarkable begins to happen. You start to understand the new rhythm. You begin to notice patterns within the change. You see how certain actions lead to unexpected results. You recognize that flexibility brings reward, while resistance creates delay. And slowly, step by step, you learn how to move within this new environment. This is where growth truly begins. Not in the moment of the shift itself, but in what comes after, in your ability to adapt, to remain open, to take action, even when the outcome is not fully clear. And as you continue to move with this new flow, something becomes evident. The instability you once feared was not instability at all. It was expansion. Your financial world is no longer limited to what you once knew. It is opening, stretching, and evolving into something broader, something more dynamic. And while this path may not feel as controlled as before, it holds far greater potential. For the goat who learns to trust this process, the new flow does not remain uncertain forever. It begins to stabilize in its own way, not as a rigid structure, but as a living system, one that responds to your awareness, your timing, and your willingness to move forward. And in this new rhythm, you begin to see something you could not see before. That what once felt like disruption was actually the beginning of a more powerful and abundant path. But as the new flow begins to settle, there is something important you must understand. Not every path that opens will lead you forward. Not every opportunity that appears will bring growth. And not every moment of movement is a sign that you are on the right direction. Because the same energy that creates opportunity also creates risk. For the goat in 2026, this becomes most evident during the peak period, the time when financial energy is at its strongest. This is when things seem to accelerate, when opportunities appear more frequently, when money may come in faster than expected, when decisions feel urgent, and everything seems to demand your attention at once. At first, this can feel like a breakthrough. You may feel as if everything is finally aligning, that the struggles of the past have led to this moment, that the shift has brought you exactly what you have been waiting for. And, in many ways, this is true. But within this peak lies a hidden danger. Because when energy rises quickly, it can cloud your judgment. Excitement can replace clarity. Urgency can replace patience. And the desire to seize every opportunity can lead you away from the path that truly serves you. This is where many people lose what they have just begun to gain. They say yes to everything. They chase every possibility. They move too quickly without taking the time to feel whether each step is aligned. And in doing so, they stretch themselves too thin, lose focus, and create instability within the very flow that was beginning to stabilize. For the goat, whose nature is sensitive and deeply connected to emotional awareness, this becomes even more important. Because when emotions rise, whether excitement, fear, or urgency, they can influence your decisions more strongly than you realize. You may act not from clarity, but from reaction. Not from alignment, but from pressure. And this is the warning you must remember. The peak is not the time to rush. It is not the time to prove yourself. It is not the time to chase everything that appears. Instead, it is the time to remain grounded, to stay calm, even when everything around you is moving quickly. To take a moment before each decision and ask yourself not just whether something looks good, but whether it feels right. Because true growth is not measured by how much you gain in a short time. It is measured by what you are able to keep. The goat who understands this will move differently during the peak. They will not be driven by the speed of the moment. They will not be pulled in every direction. Instead, they will choose carefully, act deliberately, and maintain a sense of balance even when the energy around them is intense. And in doing so, they protect their path. They allow the flow to strengthen without becoming unstable. They build something that does not collapse when the energy begins to slow again. Because after every peak, there is always a return to calm. And what remains after that moment depends entirely on how you moved while the energy was at its highest. And now we return to the quiet question that began this journey. What truly happens when your financial flow suddenly changes? Not with noise, not with warning, but with a subtle shift that only a few can feel. For the GOAT in 2026, the answer is not simple. It is not a single event, nor a fixed outcome that applies to everyone in the same way. Instead, it is a path that unfolds differently for each person, depending on how they respond to the moments that appear along the way. For some, this shift will become a breakthrough, a turning point that opens doors they never expected, a new direction that brings both opportunity and growth, not because everything was clear, but because they chose to move when the moment called for it. For others, the same shift may become a lesson, a period of confusion, hesitation, and missed chances, not because they lacked ability or effort, but because they waited for certainty that never arrived. Because they looked for clear signs instead of trusting the subtle ones. And for a small number, this year will mark the beginning of something even deeper, a complete transformation in the way they understand money, opportunity, and their place within it. A shift not only in external circumstances, but in inner awareness. The difference between these paths is not luck, it is awareness. Because the signs will not be obvious. They will not come in the form of clear instructions or guaranteed outcomes. Instead, they will appear quietly in small changes, unexpected encounters, subtle disruptions, and moments that seem ordinary at first glance. But those ordinary moments are where everything begins. So, as you move through 2026, do not look only for big events. Do not wait for something undeniable to appear. Instead, pay attention to what feels different, to what no longer flows the same way, to what begins to shift, even slightly, beneath the surface of your daily life. Because the moment that seems insignificant may be the moment that changes your direction. And here is what most people do not realize. By the time a change becomes obvious, it is already too late to fully take advantage of it. The real opportunity exists earlier, in the quiet phase, in the subtle movement, in the brief window where nothing is certain, but everything is possible. And in the next part of this journey, there is something even more important to uncover. Because this shift does not happen randomly throughout the year. It follows a hidden timing. There are specific periods in 2026 when this energy becomes stronger, when the flow moves faster, and when the opportunity to act becomes clearer for those who are prepared. But if you do not know when these moments are, you may pass through them without even realizing it. So the question is no longer whether the shift will happen. It will. The real question is, will you recognize it when it arrives? And when that moment comes, will you be ready to move? Because once you understand the timing, you no longer wait for change to happen to you. You begin to move with it, and even ahead of it.